right, this is Tim from Arc Tactical and the Bold Move podcast. We are once again getting to hang out with Ian Edwards. This is like your third episode or fourth episode. I don't even know.
I think this is number 4 for us.
if the listeners couldn't tell, we kind of like hanging out with each other, so makes things pretty easy. But one of the interesting things about podcasting is that you'll have people kind of lined up, and then circumstances change, and so having the opportunity to have a good buddy to give a call and just know that something cool is going to come out of a conversation is just invaluable. So that's what happened today, and really excited to kind of chunk through some stuff and kind of tell a story about adventure that you and I went on a couple of years back.
We've been talking about doing this for a while now.
We have, and it was just such a crazy time. But I'm really excited to kind of get into it. And what we're going to be talking about is our training trip to Dubai. And this happened in November of 22. So we're pushing 2 years right now.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to kind of step back and look at what we did there, and for a couple of different reasons, right? For the listeners out there that have training companies that are interested in going overseas or going out of country, this is an interesting explainer of how these things kind of go down. And for the trainers out there, what it's like to train in a different culture, what it's like to jump through some hurdles, because we have some pretty epic stories on that. But also, it's just kind of entertaining because we had some fun. We
did.
So,
I'm really,
thanks.
I'm really interested too, Tim, because as much as you and I have talked about this trip over and over again, I've never asked you what it was like to book that thing. And now that I'm in this role of running my own training and consulting company, I am very interested in what is that? How do you book a trip overseas, land, a contract like that, set things up? How did it happen? What were you feeling? The whole nine, man.
Yeah. It kind of came way out of the blue. I was running a conference in Utah, and staying at an Airbnb with one of the other conference people. And I opened up my laptop to do some work at night, and I had an email there from a guy named Joe. And you might not think Joe is the name of the person talking to you from Dubai, but it was. And Joe basically said, hey, look, believe it or not, in the United Arab Emirates, corrections is not a high priority, which is true everywhere, as it turns out.
In our experience, yes.
Yeah, it's just crazy to me. But that international message is still true. And he said, hey, look, we've been looking and investing in our training program here. And we just did a Google search and found Arc Tactical. And that was it. There was no advertising that I was doing over in Dubai. There was nothing. The only reason why they found me is because they had Google, and we had a pretty strong presence on there. And when they Googled corrections training, we came up.
Boom.
And, one of the things that was kind of interesting about that, and this is something that one of my mentors, Charles has been on the podcast, but one of the things he talks about is, hey, if somebody reaches out to you, that they are in front of their computer, that they are available, and that their mindset is working on this project. So if you wait to reach back, you might not get that opportunity again. And that's one of the things that stuck with me. And so there I am in St. George, Utah, exchanging emails back and forth with a guy named Joe in Dubai. And what it came to be was they had some challenges as far as operations there. They had a training program put in place, but it was not corrections focused. It was not operational or operations focused. They had some defensive tactics stuff put in, and we'll probably get into our friend Abdul there, but he a lot of DT stuff, but not a lot of how do we put this into context stuff, and that's what we offer.
Right.
And so that happened in April of 22, and we worked and we worked and we worked, and then in, I don't know, I want to say late May, June, we stopped exchanging emails. Nothing, no contact. They went radio silence. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to Dubai. Like,
It
that's
was a
not
pipe
something.
dream.
Yeah, it was a fun experiment. This probably guy was a Saudi prince trying to get me to buy into his oil company or something, right? That whole thing. And so what I just kind of stopped pursuing it. But one of the things that I have found to be really productive is even if there is no contact from the other side, people are busy, right?
Yeah.
Stuff happens where they'll have a project, and then their boss says, hey, this new project, this is what's really important. And so they'll push your project off to the side. And if you just stop reaching out, well, then it goes nowhere. And so having a little bit of persistence without pestering, right? Persistence without pestering as a business owner is really important. And so I'll send an email, and this is true today. We're starting projects all around the country, and we're actually going to Miami next month, and we went last year. Hadn't heard anything from them since, and then boom, we're going again, right? So I think it was probably July, early August of 22 that I decided to send an email. I'm a huge believer in calling first. If you can call and have a verbal relationship with somebody, that is really, really important. But they're 15 hours ahead. And so timing didn't really line up. So I sent an email, and he responded right back. Hey, Tim, really excited to get this project going again. We're looking at coming out here having you guys come out here in November. I was like, okay, that's like a couple months away. And, so that's really how it started was just a random email or a Google find on their behalf. And as soon as that happened, we just took the ball and ran with it.
So I know you're a very operationally focused person, very task driven. You're looking at all of the logistics, but realistically, what are you feeling when this prospect came up?
There, in most of the time when we get a hit from a new agency, like we know that we have a product that is something nobody else offers.
Right.
And the level in which we offer it is just off the charts. There has never been a training class that we have performed where the agency that brought us in was like, well, that was a waste of time. It has always been, where have you guys been the last 23 years of my career? These are things that I never thought of. Always that type of thing. And so we're pretty confident in our ability here locally. And in the U.S. But I'll be honest, I didn't know what Dubai had. I had no idea there. I mean, you know two things. First of all, when they told me that Dubai had a corrections department, that was news to me. I thought they just kind of like you just didn't make it out. I thought that was a wrap, right?
I always think of luxury with Dubai. Like the word that immediately pops into my head is luxury. So what is it? Jails with marble floors, who knows what they've got going on.
That's right. Well, I mean, it turns out, and we find out later that that there's a huge component to that,
Yeah.
And but that's the other side of it too, is like I didn't know that there was a huge need for correction stuff because I kind of just thought they put you away in a hole forever. Um, but the other thing that we knew is that there's a lot of money there,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to be able to make it worth our trip over there, showing them what we have to offer, while also not like nickel and diming them. Like we're financially, our company is pretty strong. We don't need to try to get every penny out of agency that supposedly has big funding, right? And so we wanted to make that fair. But I think back to your question, what was I feeling when we got that exchange? It was like excitement with some intimidation, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that having the opportunity to go international with what we've been doing, and we have trained in like Canada and stuff like that, and not to kick the shins of our Canadian brothers, but Dubai's different than that.
Yeah, for sure.
And like we can throw a rock to Canada from where we're at here in
Yeah.
Washington, and um, so Dubai was definitely different. And so with that, there was a little bit of an intimidation factor. I didn't want to go over there and then be like, yeah, we know all this stuff. We needed you to bring something more.
Right.
And the good news is that's not what happened at all. They definitely needed us. So that was a refreshing piece. But yeah, there was definitely some excitement with like, oh gosh, what's going to happen? So
Yeah, I feel like what a lot of programs do, and this is not unique to there, but almost every agency I walk into, what they do is they take a lot of good things and they package a program of a whole bunch of different good things, a lot of ingredients that really don't go together, don't mesh. There's no continuity with it, and I think that's why a lot of places, people take little bits here and there, but not it doesn't end up making sense to the people that are supposed to do the work, right?
yeah.
Because it's just a whole bunch of good ideas and good things thrown together that don't build off of one another.
Yeah, and shameless plug on what we're doing in our training programs, but we know that we don't operate in silos when it comes to just showing up to work every day. As corrections officers, you could be booking somebody in, and the next moment you're in a fight, or in the next moment, hey, this person's having a medical issue or a medical issue, and now you have to go do a transport that might be kind of sketch. So you never know what these things are going to look like, but they are very different concepts, very different skills that you need to have. And so one of the things I think we get right is that we blend those skills together in a way that they're interconnected, but
Yeah.
they're also very different. So if I have to access this piece, well, cool, I can pivot and I can switch. Or if I have to, retract and start focusing on this piece, we have the opportunity to do that. So
Yeah.
I think when we go somewhere new, which is kind of what happened here, and they see how the system is put in place, that is really where they start understanding why we have things set up the way we do. So,
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, I'm going to shift it a little bit here. Arc Tactical was hired to go to Dubai to teach our dynamic cell extraction instructor course and our prisoner transport tactics course. And I had the opportunity to bring one co-instructor with me, and that was Ian Edwards, the human performance specialist, not the tactics guy.
Yes.
So when I gave you the call, what were you feeling? What were you thinking?
Wow. I remember, like you, excitement, but I will tell you, I almost never want to shut down an opportunity. Like, oh, sure, let's do it. I don't need to know much. And I remember asking you, like, what's your expectation of me on this trip? And you were like, well, I'm mostly just going to beat up on you a whole bunch. And I was like,
True.
that sounds terrific. Let's go. Let's do that. And you did. You
Yeah.
didn't disappoint, but it was a great trip. But yeah, you and I often talk about this difference between, blending your hard skill tactics and my soft skill tactics together. But it was very much a hard skill tactic element. And even when we introduced certain things to them with mindset and breathing and resilience and some of those concepts, it's not something you can show as much. So
Yeah.
it was very difficult to even bring those topics into the discussion, through the use of a translator and everything else. But yeah, I was excited, and I mean, you could have told me we were going into some remote rainforest. I would have been like, yeah, let's go. Let's just do it. Let's see what happens.
That's what's coming next. No, it was crazy. Because, and I think, the main reason why I reached out to you wasn't because of your excellent ability to train, though you have that. It was because you were already an international traveler. You've
Yeah.
already done those things before. And I think at the time you had gone to India. Is that right?
Yeah, so a couple years prior with Blue Courage, I went out to India on a 2-week pilgrimage to really explore out there. But in the military, I've been to Saudi Arabia and Bosnia and such, and spent a few years in England and traveled all around Europe through that stint. And yeah, I absolutely love getting out there and immersing myself in other cultures for sure.
Yeah, and that was new to me, right? So that piece was important to have somebody who's done that before, that I trust come with me. Now, kind of going off on a tangent, but I think it's important to discuss our travel there. Um, One of the things that was important to me was that they booked all of our travel, because I would for sure mess it up, right? I'm not a travel agent, never been there before. I was definitely going to mess it up. But they we don't live in the same area. You live in
No.
Texas, I live in Washington. And so when we were working out the logistics, there was this piece where we both had to meet in Dubai at relatively the same time
Yeah.
from different states. And that was the parameters. And so they booked us travel. And you had a way different experience than I did, as it turns out.
I
So,
loved my experience.
yeah, you did great. So just for the listener's sake, I didn't know what I needed or what I didn't need. One of the things that I was told was that they were interested in a new style of handcuff. They were interested in a new style of baton. I have access to some companies here that allowed me to bring those tools to them. And before I did that, like, I'm wise enough to know that I don't know the laws in Dubai, right?
Right.
I know that they are pretty stringent on any type of weaponry or anything. But I got confirmation from my handler there, Joe, who was saying, hey, look, no, you can bring that stuff. It's totally going to be fine. It's for us. We're going to test it out. It's going to be fine.
You'll
It
be
was not
fine.
fine. It was
And
not
you
fine.
are used to essentially traveling with an arsenal. I can't tell you how many jobs I've worked with you where you show up with massive tack bags full of all kinds of weaponry.
Well, that's what we do, right? That's what we do.
Yeah.
It's we have high gear suits, we have sticks, we have training guns, we have all kinds of stuff. And so, but for the uninitiated, if you're not used to that, you don't really know what that is or what that looks like. And so I had them draft a letter for me that said, hey, look, it is okay on Dubai police letterhead. It is okay for this schmuck to be able to travel with this gear. And so I had that in my bag. So I bring all my bags. They, over in SeaTac Airport, I think it is famous for, being in between Seattle and Tacoma. Coffee's great there. But it's also famous for being the worst airport I've ever been to. And it's just tough to get in and out of. It is packed, people everywhere. And so I got there pretty early. I had 2 giant bags, and I waited in line for like 4 hours. They finally get me in there, and they say my bags are overweight. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I can lift it. I was totally fine. They're like, no. You have to ditch 5 pounds. So I had to go buy another bag in the airport. And as you may imagine, buying luggage at the airport is not the cheapest thing to do.
No, it's not.
Yeah, that was a rookie move on my part. So I had to go buy another bag and then transfer stuff. Finally got through it, had to wait in line all over again, get through security, and get on the plane. And it's a 15-hour plane ride. 15 hours. And it was long.
You went direct from Seattle, right? You had
direct from Seattle. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't have a connector or anything. Couldn't really stretch the legs. Now the flight was beautiful. Plane was nice. Everybody on there was super cool. It wasn't full. I had plenty of room, but 15 hours still. So I waited in line at SeaTac for 4 hours, 15-hour plane ride. I get there, I'm down for the count. And I go down to the luggage, or to the baggage claim. I find one of my bags, can't find the other one. And I'm running all over the place. I have no idea where it's at. And all of a sudden this dude it's clear that he's in government work, walks up to me and goes, this your bag? Like, yeah, man. He goes, cool, come with me. So
is this your bag of weapons?
That's right. So he had my bag. He brought me over to the customs department. They actually hooked me up. They put me in cuffs. I'm like, oh, so this is how I'm going to die. I thought this was going to be a fun trip, but no, they got me, They hooked me up. They're asking me all the questions. I'm going through an interpreter. Most of them spoke pretty solid English, but not a lot to be able to convey the message of, no, you guys wanted me to bring this stuff, right? And so I tried to convey it. I was like, look, if you go into that bag, there's a letter from the Dubai police. It's like, don't go into that bag. I'm like, that is my safe. It's right there.
Looking back, where would that letter have been, though?
It was on top of the weapons, right?
So, yeah, it should have been on person. I mean, yeah, come on.
It was a rookie move. The good news is that I did have it in my phone. I had it digitally too. So I was like, look, can I get my phone? Mm-hmm. Not only do I have that there, I also have the phone number to my handler who's supposed to be picking me up from this airport after my now 20-hour flight or my 20-hour travel trip. And they're like, no. So I waited there for about an hour and 20 minutes. They got in there. They got into my bag. They read the letter. They're like, look, we believe you, but we can't allow you to have this stuff. So we're going to destroy all of your gear.
Oh, no.
And yeah, that's essentially what I saw.
What's the price tag on what you had in that?
Bro, let's just say that.
That would be an expensive
loss
right there. That would be a big hit.
The travel, the money that we got from that job would have covered it, but barely. You know what I mean? So it would not have been worth it. And so I was like, just put me right back on a plane. This sucks.
Yeah.
But So I the first thing that happened when I got to Dubai is that I got arrested, which shouldn't be a shocker to anybody, but I was surprised. So when I finally convinced one of them, I was like, dude, do you know this guy? He's the guy from your agency. That he's here. So I convinced him to call him. And so they called him, and Joe, who is rad, he's like, dude, it's totally fine. They took me out of cuffs. They understood that, but they're like, we cannot give you your gear. So Joe was wise enough to say, hey, look, there's obviously a difference between customs and the police department. But thankfully, there was a police department inside. There's an outpost inside the airport. So they said, hey, what if we took the bag of all your gear, brought it to the police department, gave custody to them? And I'm like, I don't care. I just want out of the handcuffs now, please. Thank you. So we got there. Joe met me at the police department. We got all of that stuff squared away. I'm exhausted. It's now probably going on 22 hours. And the last thing that we needed to do was find Ian. And you had a little bit different experience on your travel.
Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. And I didn't know what to expect because you and I really had no comms other than I was just going to land and figure things out. I just hoped for the best. Looking back, I cannot believe how unsquared away we were. We didn't say where we were going to meet or how we were going to get in touch with each other. Were we going to have service? You know, at the time, we really didn't square away any real way to get a hold of one another. And so when I landed, I'm just kind of winging it, and I'm loving every second of it. But okay, so I make my way to baggage claim to find my bag, and there's already I see somebody with my bag, but I see that he's there to make sure that I don't have to touch my bag or do anything, and he's Mr. Ian, you know, this way, you know, and pretty soon there's two of them, and I'm like, this is great. I'm being ushered. They want to take selfies with me. Like, what is happening right now? So yeah, it was great. And then I don't know. We must have done the whole parade thing until all of a sudden you pop up and you and Joe are there to get me, and we finally get in touch. And I mean, yeah, it was an amazing experience.
Yeah, I'm really glad.
I remember connecting with you at the airport and going, Tim, this is amazing. They're treating us so well. And you were like, really?
Yeah, really glad to hear that on your side. Yeah. So we get to the airport, or we get to the car. They take us to the hotel, and we have to train in like 6 hours.
Oh, yeah.
It was a quick turnaround.
Yeah, it was.
And I didn't know what to expect. So we got into our hotel. Now, here's the cool thing about them is I think they were kind of courting us a little bit. Because they put us up in like a 5-star hotel in Dubai.
It was
like that,
gorgeous.
It was perfect. And we got hooked up, got to our hotel rooms, crashed out. Alarm feels like it goes off 2 minutes later, and it's go time. So we kind of got our stuff squared away. We had a driver that was going to meet us at a certain time. Our driver picked us up, brought us to the place, and it was a lot different than what I expected. I'm used to going into different areas where they have like a training room, and it's like a projector or something, and we do our spiel, and we start doing some work and that type of thing. They had a full-on ceremony for us. Yeah. It was crazy. They had like, how many generals did they have there? I mean,
oh yeah,
there was an army of generals that introduced us. They all had a speech. I'm like, dude, 8 hours ago, I was in your custody. What is happening right now? But we also had an interpreter there, and he was interesting. And not to kick his shins at all, but they did not like him at all.
No, they
And
didn't.
it was kind of interesting because he was, it made it very difficult to build rapport when they hate the guy that is your mouthpiece. And
Mm-hmm.
so we had to navigate that. But um, I think one of the first things that I wanted to ask you is when we got into that training room, we saw the setup, we saw the entourage of the people that were accepting us there. What was your thought? Like, what was your headspace?
Uh, Great question. I think just really taking it in. I think at that point I was still in very much cultural assessment mode.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make sure to not offend anybody. Culture, and you know, you had the you had local Dubai citizens that were holding posts there, but you also had every other culture that is there to support the locals, as well as our interpreter, who was another cultural
Yeah.
aspect to it. So, you know, I'm just taking it all in. What is going to be offensive? What is going to be respectful? And my brain doesn't usually operate that quickly, but for me, it was pure observation mode. And I'm asking, you know, our guys, Joe included, what do we need to do to be successful here? You know, that's immediately where my head was at. Usually I'm more focused on relationships and all that, but for me, that my cognitive brain just kicked into high gear. I it doesn't usually work that way, but it did. So I was taking it all in.
Well, I kind of needed you to do that because I was not in a space to be able to do that. I was in a space of where I'm trying to make sure that I am providing everything that they need, and I'm
Yeah,
kind of focused in game while you are my Overwatch a little bit, right? And
yeah,
so that was invaluable for me. But one of the things that was kind of interesting right off the gate is just the different cultures of training. And one of the things that we believe in as a company is that I'm never going to test you on something that we haven't trained you in.
right.
And the reason for that is it very, very quickly breaks down the learner, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I expect you to do something that you don't know how to do and you don't know how to do it because I haven't shown you how to do that thing, that's not on you. That's on us as trainers. And so many times we find ourselves in positions where that's news to people. They're like, man, this has been great. I actually feel like I've accomplished something today. Well,
Right,
yeah, because we're not showing you that we're better than you right off the bat. We're showing you that you can be better than where you're at when you started.
right.
And that's been a very important tenet of what we do. But turns out they didn't have that same idea. And one of the things that they said right off the bat, and this was news to me, they were like, look, we are very data driven.
Mm-hmm.
What are the metrics that you're using to show that this training has been successful?
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, we had scenarios that had very distinct data points of things that we were looking for them to perform after we had shown them. Like
Yeah,
very, very simple things like, hey, before you enter the cell for our cell extraction, talk to somebody, right? Do an assessment, try to build a rapport, try to de-escalate. Um, Working together as a team as opposed to working against each other, right? Having a plan, um, strategy. The very, very basic concepts, but a lot of stuff in pre-deployment. We had several techniques that we were looking for them to perform too, team
yeah,
tactics stuff. Um, and all these things they're not complex, but
yeah.
you needed to be trained in how to do these things. Otherwise, it would not work well. And the way the scenario works is essentially I get into a impact resistant, not proof, very important, not impact proof suit, but an impact resistant suit. And I am a bad guy. And they go and perform what they needed to perform on me. And that was going to be our final after the 2 weeks of training. They had us out there for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks of training, that's what they were going to do. And Joe, right out the gate, said, cool, we need you to do that test first because we need to have a baseline to drive our data. And that went completely against our philosophy of we're not going to make you guys do something that you don't know how to do. And so I was like, all right. Within 24 hours, 30 hours of me being here, I've been arrested, stayed at a 5-star hotel. And now, without providing any training, I'm going to go and fight these 25 police officers. And so that's just what we did. They put us in a van.
To be fair, it was fun from the sidelines, just eating
good.
my popcorn, watching you get beat up. It was a good time.
I'm glad you enjoyed yourself. Yeah. But that was what was kind of interesting is that the cells that we were training in, first of all, no AC. It's a little crispy out there. I think it was pushing 90 at 7 a.m., 7:30.
Yeah.
And they drive us out to their prison. And we had a cell there. And so I figured we're here. We might as well do what they want us to do. Mm-hmm. So we set up the scenario. I leaned on you. I said, hey, man, I'm going to get dressed up here in the suit. Just make sure they don't kill me. And you did a great job of that. But you really didn't have to do a heavy lift again because, and this is not to pick on these guys, but they just hadn't had any training. Their cell extraction methodology was to just go into the cell.
Right.
They opened the door without talking. The first dude in the door, he went down. Right. The second one was like, what do I do? And he tried to grab a hold of me. I pulled away. They didn't have a lot of answers for the problems that I was given to them. Mm-hmm. And the first group of 5, I think we did 5 groups of 5. The first group, they couldn't get me down to the ground. They could not control me. And finally I had you call it. Second group, who watched the first group, by the way, now it's an open book test, did the same thing, right? They just didn't have any answers. And that went on. And so what we found pretty early on is their tactics were challenged in that they didn't use barriers. They didn't have an idea of what space meant.
Right.
Their defensive tactics were okay, but they lacked the ability to work together, I think was the biggest thing that I saw.
Yeah.
And they didn't really communicate with each other or with me.
You're right.
And so we learned a lot there. And what was funny is we get back in the van and Joe's laughing. He is laughing. And I'm like, what's so freaking funny, Joe? It's 95 degrees out. I just fought 25 of your guys. And your best guys, by the way, because they weren't putting the slouches in this class. And he goes, dude, on the way over here, these guys were like telling you, what are these white boys from the U.S. going to teach us? There's no way. And now these guys are grumbling. They're listening to you now. I'm like, oh, okay, that's good.
It created a vacuum.
Yeah, it did. And I think there was a lot to be said about just doing it.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about just doing the thing. We could have provided resistance. Like, no, that's not really how we operate. It did violate one of our principles of providing training before we test. But, man, it's their house. That's what they wanted. So that's what we were going to give them. And
if I could do one thing over just with that scenario, it would be, I remember having my journal there and I was trying to capture the points, all the points of their baseline as they were going in. And in hindsight, I probably would have just recorded each entry and then we could have broke them down later.
Yeah.
I think I would have captured a lot more and especially been able to get your eyes on it.
Well, and I think we would have, but they were very, very tight on media. They had their own media guy there, and they did not want us taking our own stuff. I mean, we slipped a couple pictures, but they do not appreciate that. So it's kind of interesting. I think we did the best with what we had, you know. So we set the tone with that, and then, you know, we start training. And what do you think the biggest challenge of us teaching them was?
Our time constraints. I
Mm.
I mean, realistically, I was looking at you after day one because you essentially were given 80 hours, but realistically, we had at most 40 to work with because by the time we got everyone in class, it was late. Then we had, you know, the meal times, prayer times, and we did very short days. So you took an 80-hour curriculum and condensed it down to about 40 hours, which in the training world is absolutely unheard of. And I think, you know, people would typically say, "Oh, great, short days. You're in Dubai. You can."
No.
Not from a perspective of no, but they're gonna expect the same product at the end of that 40 hours as the 80.
Yeah.
So trying to convey all that in such a short amount of time, and I really appreciated your not only adaptability, but really leaning on principles based training so that we're not getting so caught in the weeds. We're just really sticking to the principle over and over and over again. So at the end of that 2 week experience, they knew the principles, and we knew walking out of there that they would be able to go back and transfer the very simple principles to their peers.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to give kind of a clearer idea of what that looked like, class was supposed to start at 7:30, but they brought us breakfast. They catered breakfast and lunch. And so we would go to class, and they'd have the full buffet out there, and these guys didn't stop eating until like 8:39.
Yeah.
And
I was
so
going to say,
trying to
you
get,
probably started curriculum every day at about 9:30.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And then I want to say, I can't remember when prayer time was, but I want to say it was around noon,
Yep.
something like that. And then, so that we lost about an hour with that. And then lunch was at 2, and then we were out by 3:30. So
Yeah.
the actual training time was so diminished. But one of the interesting things that I found with that was I think they retained the information better. And it's something to be said about, hey, look, in the US, you have an 8-hour, 10-hour, 12-hour training
Yep.
day. And we're just going to shove all this information into this time that's allotted. And then the expectation is that this person's actually going to have that amount of information still and retain it
Right.
after, which doesn't happen at all. Because you can only absorb information for so long and be able to, I hate using the term regurgitate, but be able to go and perform that
Yeah.
at a higher level. And so by having those breaks, it actually gave their brains and their bodies more time to absorb the information that we were providing, and their level of performance actually was better off for it.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting. And, you know, if we're looking at the best ways to train stuff, it kind of worked. You know, it kind of worked.
It
Maybe
did.
we should be doing
At
that.
the end of the 2 weeks, they showed proficiency in exactly what you showed up to train them on. So
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to run past some of the other cultural differences that we found. One of the things that I thought was interesting was their engagement level. There were some of them were very excited to be there. Some of them were not. You know, and one of the things that was really important to us in any type of physical skill is that we provided some type of warm up prior to. Because
yes.
one of the major retractions from agencies all over the place about doing physical skills is that they're worried people are going to get injured, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I never makes sense to me. because do you want them injured in training, or do you want them injured while performing in a live, real life scenario, where I'm fighting a real person, and in my opinion, I'd like it to be in training. So why wouldn't we, provide more of that so it's easier? I think one of our mentors, Gary Drake, says, sweat more, bleed less. And I think there's a lot to go with that. But these guys hated doing the warm-ups. They hated doing them. And it was so funny to me because we weren't doing CrossFit workouts. We were doing very basic mobility stuff, just body weight workout stuff like that. But there was a lot of resistance to it. And I think
one of my favorite moments with that too, because they kept pushing back on you with these warm-ups, and it's inside the classroom, and you have them all circled up where they can do these exercises. And this guy comes to you and he's begging, he's pleading, can we just take a walk outside? Can we just take a walk? Can we go for a walk instead? And you did. You said, sure, everyone outside. What did that look like?
Well, I think I just, I'm a parent. My kids are pretty tenacious. And what this kind of made me feel like is like, hey, look, we have this program. This guy's doing everything in his will to be able to change that. We don't actually put the work in before class starts. He just wants to go for a little stroll. And what was kind of interesting about this complex is that I would say it's about a mile around. Like, it's a big complex, but there's one main thoroughfare that it just circles the entire place. And about every 100 yards, there's a light post. And so, again, it's 7:30. It's about 90 degrees out there. It's kind of warm. And I just was like, you know what? Let's do an outside workout. And so the guy that wanted to just go for a walk, we went for a walk. We walked from the first light post to the second. And then I made them do a sprint from the second to the third. Then from the third to the fourth, we did lunges. Then we did bear crawls. And then we did, we worked them out. Made them run backwards, made them jog, did all kinds of stuff. And by the time we were done with that mile, everybody was looking at this dude that just wanted to go for a walk outside.
And they never asked for a walk again.
Not again. And what was funny is Joe watched us do most of it, but he watched us do it. He didn't go with it. And he just kind of wanted to be on Overwatch. So when we came back into the training room, he was dying laughing. He's like, that guy's never going to ask for anything from you ever again. That's so funny. Oh, man. Well, let's talk a little bit about communication. And for me, I think you actually have a better recollection of this than I do. But just working with our interpreter there and some of the challenges that we had with him, I think from my side, I've never taught through an interpreter. And I think a lot of the enthusiasm as an instructor that I can produce in others comes with my tone and how I frame my words and the selection of words. But because of working through an interpreter, a lot of that was lost. And that was kind of a challenge. But from kind of your perspective, tell me a little bit about what you saw, because I was just trying to manage.
Yeah. Well, I think it's exactly what you were talking about, where they could learn fine. That very little of our language is the words that we say. So even though speaking a different language, they picked up on just about everything that you were trying to teach them. And what I also noticed is that when he translated what you just said, if there was any discrepancy between what they knew your meaning was and what he was delivering, there was a loss of credibility. And so I think they gave him the benefit of the doubt at the beginning of our journey, but 3-4 days in, there was incongruence between the message you were giving that they could easily pick up on and what he was delivering. And they started essentially comparing notes and translating to each other exactly what they think that your message was. And I think for the most part, they just got fed up with it. There was a loss of respect in the medium. And I think about, I mean, you talked about that earlier about how, you have somebody delivering a message and then somebody who is not able to clearly articulate what that message is and how there is a loss of respect. How often do we see that in police and corrections cultures, right? Where maybe the chief or the sheriff has this idealistic message that they want the troops to get, but because of some breakdown in communication along the way, the message is destroyed and people are grumbling and there's a loss of respect. And I mean, we see it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like a micro version of that.
It was. And it was every day with everything that we said. And what's kind of interesting, like you said, I think it was probably about day 3 or 4. And eventually, the system's pretty easy. I say something, I'm looking at the group, but I'm also looking at my interpreter. I have to stop what I'm saying because I want to make sure I'm not talking too fast or too much for him to digest and then send back out. And as I'm watching him talk, I see in their faces like, that doesn't make any sense,
Right.
And I think when you say loss of credibility, I believe that the credibility wasn't lost with us.
No.
More so with him. But It didn't matter because the stimulus that they were receiving to be able to then perform, that was what was degraded. So it didn't really matter what we were saying or what we weren't saying, but they saw that there was a problem.
Right.
And so pretty quickly in the training, they're like, let's get this guy out of here. They voted him off the island. And so now we're in a position where, hey, they understand that there's a language barrier and they don't care and we don't care.
Yeah.
We're just going to show them the principles and we're going to work this out. Because some of them did speak relatively good English, but we were able to manage pretty well. And it was just a great experience because I felt like there was no better way to build trust than to take something that had trust that was degraded and then patch that back up.
Yeah.
And it was very surreal. So for the trainers out there, if you ever want to train with an interpreter, make sure you got somebody who knows what you're talking about and is able to convey that message. So, it was a wild time. But I think we got them to do all the things, and it was an instructor course, right? So we got them to do the basic skills that we wanted them to take away from. They could perform it at a level that they can then teach it. And then when we had them teach, we could actually see them use some of the wording or some of the phrasing that we would use, which was really cool because you could see that they got the information the way they needed to get it. And so that was super impactful. But we were all just working towards the final day. And that final day, the idea initially was those scenarios that we did on day 1, we were now going to do it on the last day and see how they perform. And I will tell you that I was not prepared for what they had in mind because here's the thing about Dubai, everything's a spectacle there, right? They wanted to do it big. So they had media out there. They had a full transport entourage for some of our transport tactics stuff. They had filming locations, they filmed the whole thing. And I was very proud to see how these guys were able to take what we taught them basic entry, communication, make connection, do a team tactic, get the person down on the ground, cuff them up, pick them up, do a scout of where they were going to do their transport, load somebody into the car, and get out of there. And these guys did that time and time and time again, and it looked fantastic.
Yeah.
It looked real solid. So from your perspective, though, what did you see from day 1 to day 10?
Day 1 to day 10. I mean, obviously we saw the progression of the tactics, but I just thought it was so cool to see how two different worlds came together, and by the end of that experience we were like family to these guys. And even Joe and team out there were saying like they have accepted you guys in. They're inviting you out to things that they wouldn't have, and culturally it was just interesting because these cops, these dudes would come up and they would hold your hand. They would stand by you and hold your hand, or just hold you and hug you. And for us it was just like, what is happening?
Am
But
I getting
really
arrested again?
they were incredibly affectionate, and we had become family to them, and they had, as you said, voted the middleman off the island, and we were inner circle. And for me, that was really important, that you could build connections without even speaking the same language. Just getting in there and showing best of intent and moving them forward and developing them, and at no point ridiculing or humiliating or punishing. It was everything was done in a very light, friendly manner. I don't know if they had ever experienced training where you just slow step, you start where somebody is at and just keep building and building and building and building and building until they get to this place with absolutely no humiliation along the way, but rather start humble and continue to level up with every encounter. And I don't think, as I said, I don't think that traditionally they get that kind of training. I think a lot of it is, trial by fire. And
Yeah, we got to
it
work
was a
with one of
paradigm
their,
shift for them.
for sure. We got to work with one of their trainers there, and I don't want to take anything away from him, but he, when we would be teaching something, and he would go and like help, and he would watch somebody, perform what we were teaching, and then if they didn't do it right, he was on them and yelling at him and screaming at him. I'm like, no, you're ruining everything.
Style, yeah.
Yeah, that's not what we're doing. That's not how we do it. And so having that shift of, hey, look, turns out that if you're screaming at somebody, it doesn't get better results. Weird, right?
Yeah.
And that's like when I don't know, it was probably the second week when he finally was like, I really just want to yell at them. Can we just do that? And I'm like, no, man, we're cool. And so he stopped coming around. Like he just wanted to yell. But that doesn't perform or produce results. And so to your point, we were like family. We had, high ranking officials there inviting us to dinner, wanting to connect. We had, dinner a couple of nights with Joe and our other hand. They showed us around some of their other training places. I mean, it was just really fantastic.
Yeah, it was a great time.
It was. And so I think that was a trip that I'll never forget. It was a trip of a lifetime. And I hope to go back. I think we probably will at some point. We still are in communication. I just exchanged emails with Joe a couple weeks ago.
Nice.
But it was just a great way to, number one, connect with a different culture, but also to show that, hey, look, the stuff that we have that we're putting out there not only holds up in the U.S., but it holds up internationally and a lot better than what they already had.
Yeah.
And that was, for me, as the business owner who believes in what we're doing, that was a huge affirmation that I felt like I needed to have.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great trip, man. Uh, Going up the Burj Khalifa with you, and what did we do? We got out to the police academy. We went out on the Palm Tree Island, which is way bigger. Everything there is bigger than I expected. You know,
Yeah.
you see it on movies, but everything. I mean, it is the most massive city I've ever driven through, and to see that infrastructure doing the frame, we got to go
I
up the
was,
frame.
it was amazing. We're like, this line is ridiculous, but
Yes,
we got to do it, right? We got to do it.
when in Rome, right? And
Yeah.
God, I remember one of the days we got back, and you were just, I think, had work to do, and you had all these other things lined up, and so I was like, I'm gonna walk to someplace. So I find this place. It's like 3 miles away, and so I walk to this shopping center, this market, and I'm doing things there. And by the time I got there, I was so smoked. And then I'm walking back, and a couple hours later, and I started getting super dizzy,
Mm.
and I started seeing tunnel vision and stuff. And I remember telling you, like, "Hey, brother, this is my location in case I go down." You're like, do I need to come get you? And I was like, no, I think I'll make it, but just keep in mind.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Yeah, no. I mean, the cool thing was is where we were staying was pretty centralized.
Yeah.
There's a lot of touristy type stuff there, but like big malls, like all that stuff. And so you weren't too far away from help, but yeah, probably shouldn't have done that.
No, I probably should have taken a cab.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was a good time. We had
Yeah,
some good experiences.
yeah, great stories there. Some that we'll talk about offline, but some that I think deserve to be shared. And one of the things that struck me is just the service and the relationships that the people and the culture there have. And
Yep.
we were lucky enough to be able to have meals provided as part of our contract, and they were all provided from either the catering at the training or the hotel that we were staying at. But one of the things that was kind of interesting to that is, for our breakfast, for example, like we just want coffee. We're both from the Pacific Northwest. We need coffee, pretty important.
Yeah.
But the breakfast place didn't open until after we left. Right, every day is when our training day started, and over the couple of days, we built a relationship with the people that opened up that restaurant, and they're like, "Dude, we will have your coffee waiting for you," and they did.
Mm-hmm. They did.
And
With a
every
note
day.
every day.
Yeah, exactly. The
Have a
service
good
was
day,
crazy.
Mr. Ian, kind of thing.
Yeah. But the cool thing about that was, and we kind of discovered it later, is that the only people that get to live in the United Arab Emirates or Emiratis,
Yeah.
everybody else there, all the workers, everybody else is there on a work visa,
Yep.
which means if they don't perform, they're not going to be working. And if they're not working, they don't get to stay there.
Yeah.
So everybody has this drive of trying to be the best and trying to really embrace their value and
Mm-hmm.
treat people the way that they should be treated and go above and beyond. It was just a great culture.
Yeah.
And we experienced that. Everybody was super nice to us. It was just kind of an interesting paradigm shift, because I remember flying back into Seattle and I'm like, oh, I'm lucky to be giving my money to this guy now, right? Like that, the whole thing changed. I didn't realize
Different
where I
work
was.
ethic where I can get
Yeah.
away with doing the bare minimum.
Yes, exactly. And then I should be praised for that,
Yeah.
But it's a great culture over there. And I just really appreciated, being able to go with you and having those stories and the time in the pool every day and the dinners and the discussion, and I think really that connected a lot of our friendship and our brotherhood moving forward. So I appreciate you taking that trip with me, man. And I can't think of anybody else I'd rather go with. So
yeah, let's do it again.
we should. Anyway, I think I hope this was interesting. And going back on some of our experiences and talking about international travel, international training, messaging, culture. And, I feel like these type of things are what are consistent between no matter wherever you are, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's Dubai or whether it's Tennessee or whether it's, Canada or wherever. So I hope it was interesting. I hope the listeners got something fun out of it. And thank you for doing this. This was a great topic that you brought up, bro.
Yeah, no, awesome, brother. Let's do it again.
All right. Let's do it again, man. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, man.